Hey there guys, we're going to take a look now at the Golgari deck that I've put together here. This is going to be kind of a package a bit heavier on the Return to Ravnica cards. There were a lot of things that I wanted to give a shot to, but kind of trying to stick a little bit more to the kind of standard rock control package where you're looking at lots of creature kill and lots of discard to go alongside things. So when you look at the popular choices, Putrid Leech is something that is often overlooked, and that was definitely something I wanted to bring in. It can be a great body. It's a 2/2 cost creature, which is great in itself, but the fact that you can then pay life to make it bigger makes it all kinds of troublesome. It can be a big beater. It can work great for combat tricks. It causes your opponent all kinds of issues, and he has to have an option to get rid of it at that 4 toughness instead of just 2. So that was kind of, obviously going to be a foundation of this deck. Now, when looking at the Return to Ravnica cards, I obviously am bringing in almost a full set of Gatecreeper Vines. I did want lots of land ramp, but I am going to be using Grizzly Salvage as well as a way to up our mana count. So I didn't want to kind of go overboard on that. I'm going to keep it down to 3. Now, an interesting thing I thought, when you look at the cards that we have available to us that interact with gates, obviously the big one is going to be Gatecreeper Vine. However, we did get another one that I thought was really great. I used it in Limited a lot, Ogre Jailbreaker. Now, this is a 4/4 defender, and that's mediocre, but the fact is that if you have a gate into play, it loses defender and it can attack. I'm sorry, it does not lose defender, let me correct myself there. It can attack as though it did not have defender, and that's a critical difference, but it doesn't matter for this deck, so we're going to kind of overlook that for now. But when you have a gate in play, it basically works out to being a 4/4 creature for 4. And because the cost has 3 colorless in it, it's pretty easy to play when you are playing multiple colors as well. So I think it has a lot of potential. I did experiment a couple of times with upping this count to 3, and I liked it, but occasionally you did find a situation where you didn't get a gate and then it's just a 4/4 wall. This guy is great. I always talk about how 4/4 creatures have a lot of troublesome abilities, and they can just be hard for an opponent to deal with. So I think this guy works really well. I think there's a great opportunity to go for it here because we do have a lot of chances to get a Guild Gate into play. Obviously the first one is the Gatecreeper Vines, but the other one I wanted to talk about is the Grizzly Salvage. Now, Grizzly Salvage is another Return to Ravnica card. You look at the top 5 cards of your library, you reveal them so your opponent does have access to see what they are, and you put a creature or a land from those into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Now, this can be seen as a bit of a drawback, but we have built this deck to kind of work around this. The first thing that we're going to go with is we're building a creature base where the important creatures, the leeches and the razors, are in that 3 or less casting cost. This allows us an opportunity to bring in Unearth, because Unearth, if we throw creatures to the graveyard with Grizzly Salvage, we can then use Unearth to bring them back to the battlefield. And it basically is going to work itself as a little extra draw if we choose to cycle it. And even if we don't hit something with Grizzly Salvage, the Unearth still gives us an opportunity to recur a creature. Also, in that same idea of working out of the graveyard, we're bringing in a set of 3 Spinning Darknesses, and that's something I also considered upping the count of it. I really like it. I do sometimes struggle with the fact that it is non-black, and I always seem to run into black decks when running them, but it does 3 damage to a target creature that is non-black, and then you gain 3 life, and that's really great. So if you're throwing away cards to your graveyard, a couple of black cards go in there, you can then use Spinning Darkness and cast it for free without that 6 mana cost, which is often very heavy. So you can then put that back into play for free. You can kill off a creature that, I say it, I'm sure you're all tired of hearing it, but you get a lot of the creatures in the format are 3 toughness or less. So if you have something like Lightning Bolt that can do that 3 damage, then you're going to be pretty well off. Now, the last thing that is going to kind of interact with the Grizzly Salvage is Raven's Crime. I did, like I said, want to bring in a bit of a discard package here, and I'm using 2 Raven's Crimes. If that goes to your graveyard from Grizzly Salvage, because it does have this retrace ability, it gives you an opportunity to use it from your graveyard. If you have just a discard spell in hand, that's great, you can't really recur it, but this retrace ability gives us the opportunity to throw away a land and use the Raven's Crime over and over. If we throw it away accidentally with Salvage as opposed to drawing it, we can still use it, as opposed to something like Duress, where if that goes to the graveyard from Salvage, it's done. That's it. That was your only opportunity. And one thing I want to keep in mind while we're kind of on the subject here is that 6 is the magical number. You want to have 6 lands in play, and after that 6, you can feel free to throw stuff away. 6 is kind of your ideal point in time because it gives you an opportunity to cast Spinning Darkness without having to worry about the 3 black cards. And you do have to be aware on occasion, using this exiling the top 3 card ability for Spinning Darkness can sometimes hit into Raven's Crime, so you have to be a little bit smart about how you manipulate your graveyard. But the ability to hit that 6 land count is going to give you plenty of mana to use Spinning Darkness for its cost, or you can cast basically anything else because your other highest is 4. So once I get to 6, I will like to sit on a bunch of lands for Raven's Crimes, especially, discard. They work great as fodder for your opponent's spells as well. Now let's see. This does seem a bit of a hodgepodge package, and I think if I was going to tune this up to be more competitive, I would probably adjust some of these 2 counts. I am running a lot of them. I did want a 5 count of discard spells, and I considered swapping out Duress for something like Distress, or maybe a little bit stronger discard spell that comes in at that 2 mana cost. Duress works pretty well. You can't really complain. For the fact that it lets you get rid of a card. Unfortunately, the non-land, non-creature thing occasionally will cause you issue. Now, there are a couple of other options for discard spells, but you don't want to get your mana cost up too high. I think Duress works really well, and you have a lot of opportunities for an early game play where it's turn 1 Duress or Raven's Crime into turn 2 Leech or Gatecreeper Vine into turn 3 Rager, and that would be kind of a great ideal start. As far as our remaining control package, 2 copies of Echoing Decay. Whenever I'm playing black or blue, Echoing Decay or Echoing Truth are an automatic 2 of inclusion. At the next kill spell is a full set of Doomblades. This is something, Doomblade is definitely the go-to thing. I really, with the popularity of the green-white hexproof armor decks, maybe you want to switch these out for Edicts, but Doomblade is kind of your generic best direct kill spell in black that doesn't require a 2 black cost. Now, I honestly feel that a 2 black cost is not so critical in this deck. It is very heavy on black, as opposed to some of these other decks that I'm going to feature in this article, where if you're bringing in a double colored spell, it may draw you back because you will not have it. If the 2 colors in your deck are pretty much even as far as the number, then it could cause you some issues. I finished out with Dead Weight. There are some other, spells available to you at this slot. I kind of liked the ability to put in a 1-cost kill spell. I like Dead Weight over some of the other -2/-2 1-cost spells because of the fact that it is an enchantment. So it can be used, as a direct creature kill, or if it comes to it, you can use it simply to make something smaller and easier to deal with. Maybe say a Mirror Enforcer. That 4/4 is a little bit troublesome because you have not drawn into either of these, but being able to put the dead weight on it makes it down to a 2/2, and something you can deal with, whether it's with a Rage or your Leech can attack into it and survive. So I think the fact that that is an enchantment gives us a little more utility. Let's see, I brought in a single copy of the Shinobi. I like the ability to return creatures to my hand. It gives you a replay ability on the Rager, as well as the Elder. It's not something that come up very often because it is a single, but if you do come into it, it's great. You will actually be able to cut through your deck pretty fast between these 6 cards. The Gatecreeper Vine is, of course, going to thin out your deck's just land, but the Grizzly Savage, each one of these cuts out 5 cards for a total of 15. So if you can dig through 15 cards of your deck that fast, that can work really well. Also, the Ragers will draw you cards, and that will help if you cycle on Earths. It's just, you may not be aware of it, but there is a lot of possibilities for cutting through your deck pretty fast. You will be able to find the Shinobi probably a little bit more than a deck with a little less draw. So being able to get that in and having that discard ability is really great. Like I said, it's also great to return the Ravengers. You have a lot of, the Ragers. You have a lot of opportunities to, you have 4 draws off these, but also, 2 unearths make it so that you have an additional 2 possible draws. The Shinobi gives you yet another possible draw off those. So I really like the fact that you can draw so much. the Spinning Darkness becomes almost critical because of how much life you will pay off on these leeches and ragers. That is why I've debated it, bumping it up to 4, but like I said, I keep running into situations where I'm playing a whole bunch of mono black, or a deck that is running black creatures, and then the Spinning Darkness is useless. And once again, because I am not playing these really hardcore into competitive, I have not built sideboards, so if it was a sideboard thing, no big deal, you could just switch those out. Final card is Wickelborough Elder. It's a great card for artifact and enchant removal, and again, being that I'm playing these mostly in the casual rooms, it's something that comes around a little bit more often. So I like to have that ability to remove those available to me. Again, if I was trying to refine these down a bit more, maybe I would get rid of these 2 Elders for a 3rd Jailbreaker and a 4th Spinning Darkness. And then you would again have the sideboard option to get rid of Spinning Darkness if you find yourself against any one of the mono black control. If you found yourself against UB control, teachings, Demir Post. I don't know, recently just looking at what metadata they have given us, I have not seen a lot of it, so Spinning Darkness becomes a little bit more important. You have seen, I guess, a little bit more of not UB Post, UB control. There is a new list that has come out that people have jumped on, but I still think Spinning Darkness is great, and like I said, that life gain can be really important if you're spending a lot of life working off these leeches and ragers. So I am going to actually cut this this video into pieces, so don't mind the break. It'll be one video, but there will be a bit of a break in between them. So let's check out the game, shall we? Alright, so we're going to take a look at the first game here. Pretty nice opening hand. We have 2 lands available to us, and once again, both colors, so it's really great. A little less fun because of the fact that we have no early discard in Duress or Raven's Crime, and no creature drops at all. It could provide actually a very interesting start. Deck is, I guess, a little bit creature light, but not so much that it's usually noticeable. You see here, still not getting the creature draws is definitely unusual. So opponent puts down a Lawkeeper. If he is playing some kind of mildly casual competitive, which he is, white aggro deck, it is the soldiers deck, so I know that it's going to be playing armor smiths and all these veterans in order to pump up all of these little soldiers that are normally something you don't want to worry about. By itself, the Lawkeeper is not something I want to kill. I have a lot of options available for killing things, but I know that this itself is not going to be a lot of trouble to me, and what I want to save those for is something more important like this armor smith or the swordsmith. So that's going to come down. Obviously going to have to use Doomblade for that. I can use Deadweight on the Swordsmith because it has that 2 toughness, but the armor does have 3 toughness, and so Doomblade has to be my answer. It's going to work out pretty well because if I do get a lot of these control options going early on, as you see, I still have gotten no creatures. It's going to give me opportunities to play these Spinning Darknesses for their cost of removing 3 black cards from my graveyard. So we're drawn to Unearth, and because I still have gotten no creatures, I am going to take this opportunity to cycle that. Most chances you'll want to save it for creatures, but this is kind of an odd situation, and it's kind of almost an ideal draw against a white weenie deck like this. I am going to see here at the end of the turn, cycle it and see what I come into. So getting more lands, I'm going to build up to my 6 count, which is important. At this point in time, talking is for the win, but at this point in time, the Lawkeepers are going to be not troublesome. I will sit around and hope that maybe I come into an Echoing Decay and I can get rid of those all at once. By themselves, 1/1 creatures, not too worried about it. All of my creatures can block those. So the Javelineer is something that I do want to kind of deal with. It's not troublesome, but that 1 damage may be a problem later on. I do have options. I can use Deadweight, however, to get rid of that instead, because it's got that simple 1 toughness. So building up lands, waiting. I'm going to take a lot of damage actually to these 2 Lawkeepers simply because I am not drawing a lot in the way of creature spells. Bit of a pause here. My opponent cycles the Gem Palm Avenger, which is going to make those bigger and draw him a card. I was unsure, I guess, as to whether or not I wanted to take this much damage. I did decide that 15 was at a point in time where I could still take damage and be pretty well off. You see now I finally got my land base to 6, so I'm going to be able to hold on to lands if I desire. Because now I can cast Spinning Darkness without having to waste any kind of extra mana waste myself by removing cards from the graveyard. So he once again cycles the Gem Palm Avenger, and I decide, okay, enough is enough, I don't want to take an additional 4. I use a Doomblade to kill off the first, and the second I am going to use Spinning Darkness. This gives me a little bit more breathing room, puts me back to 14. Now if he gets a couple of little creatures going on, I can sit back once again and take some damage. So you see we luck into Raven's Crime, still not a single creature, which is a little bit disturbing, but it is going to give us an opportunity to get rid of. You see, he's got armors and stuff in his hand. Because his mana is so low in the early game, this deck that he is playing is not going to be as strong because it needs, like any weenie deck, to get a whole bunch of creatures on the table. So if he doesn't have a whole bunch of creatures on the table, he's kind of on his heels and unable to play multiples in one turn. I am going to be able to, again, use Raven's Crime. This is twice in one turn. The first from the original cast, and the second because I had drawn an extra land. And that one did nail down a Swordsmith. So, going to spend a couple of turns here until I draw a creature, just whittling down my opponent's hand. He does put down another Swordsmith, but I have two options that are plenty good enough to get rid of it. Thankfully, Dead Weight is going to hit that very nicely. I do start off with Raven's Crime. You see a very nice card to get rid of is the Guardian's Pledge, something that definitely works very well. Very, very nice card that was printed relatively recently. So finally, Dead Weight's going to come down and kill off that Swordsmith. Again, another one comes down, but I have the option for Spitting Darkness. I'm going to cast out the Rager. It's going to give me a chance to block that and trade off if I so desire. I don't have to waste this Spitting Darkness just yet. I can save it for something that may be troublesome. Maybe if he starts getting multiples, if he doesn't attack for a while and we kind of stalemate out, then I can start using it to kill stuff off. But I am going to use this land that I draw off the Rager to get rid of the last card into his hand. Unfortunately, he makes a bit of a misplay, and I know I've done this before. In response to my Raven's Crime, he cycles Gem Palm Avenger. So instead of just discarding Gem Palm Avenger, he ends up losing two cards because whatever he drew, he now has to discard, and he loses actually a Core Skyfisher, which would have been a great thing for him. It wouldn't have troubled me too much because of this darkness, but flying is definitely something this deck can struggle with. So he doesn't play anything. I do have a land in hand, but I'm not going to waste it with Raven's Crime because obviously he has no cards. I'm not going to waste it by putting it onto the field either. I am going to just keep it in hand, and that way if he does hold on to a card, whether that's a pump spell or whatever, it's going to give me an opportunity to get rid of it. Hit yet another land. Maybe a little bit flooded, but it works really well in this situation because I do have Raven's Crime. And you see that was a situation where you had a card that was not a land, it was a Raise the Alarm. And I'm guessing he F6 through the turn. It was definitely a misplay because in response to Raven's Crime he should have played it. But, you know, that's why I was holding on to these lands. I'm going to stick to 6 lands in play, and that's going to give me those opportunities. He does decide to just concede out. Not sure what he drew there. I'm going to guess a land. But I think this was still a pretty good example of how the Raven's Crime can be utilized well, and you'll get a lot of these lands, you know, stick to 6, and anything beyond that you can find great use for. Okay guys, we're going to dive in here on the second game for the Golgari deck. Opening hand was not great. You might see this hand be a little tempted, and I know I was. You do have a Duress, you have all these 1-drops, and Raven's Crime. And getting that out on turn 1 is really powerful. It's a really great play, especially when your opponent is not on the draw. However, what would I think kind of convince me to take this hand and give it a chance would be if this was a swamp. Because we do have a Guildgate, it means it's not even going to be untapped until turn 2. We're not going to have a chance to even make that turn 1 play, and it kind of defeats the purpose. If we wanted to do that, we would have to top deck into a swamp, so we're definitely going to have to mulligan this away. Like I said, it's something that I might have taken a chance on, maybe not actually in competitive play, but I like to occasionally give a hand like that a go. So, mulligan to 6, this is pretty good. We are on the draw, so dropping down 1 card is not going to hurt us too bad. This opening hand now has 3 lands available to us. We do get a Guildgate, which will provide the second color that we need, and the Jailbreaker will be a nice play on turn 4 if we can find that extra land. No early game plays, but that's okay. Hopefully we can draw into something that will allow us to get an early aggression on. Now, opponent starts out with the Centaur's Herald. This is going to basically tilt his hand at playing a Populate mechanic. It's something that was recently printed in Return to Ravnica and may be the best card for token generation, at least sizable token generation. We have a lot of token generation that creates a couple of white soldier tokens, and that's well and good, but a whole bunch of white 1/1s is not something I'm going to be afraid of. A 3/3 token is going to actually be the same size as a decent creature. So that kind of tells me he's going with it. It's going to have to kind of work in my favor. I do think, I've said it many times now, that Populate is not really a set mechanic for Pauper. it definitely just has some struggles as far as token generation and the cost on the spells. You really have to run a lot as far as land ramp. So puts down Elvish Visionary. Now, with the removal in this deck, if I can point out real fast, we're going to have kind of a priority of order. Most of the time, our priority is going to be a big creature that we cannot deal with, an absolute bomb. That's going to be target number 1. The number 2 target, in a very close second, is going to be tokens, especially these 3/3 Centaur tokens. And the reason for that is because if you get rid of all the tokens, he can't use Populate. In order to populate, you need to have a token on the field. So if I can use my control spells smartly and keep those tokens off the field, then we can, keep things pretty even. He will have no targets for his populate ability. There are some spells that allow him to create a creature token and populate in the same one, but a lot of the ones are actually just do something else. There is a removal. There's a card that says remove target creature and then populate. So if he has that spell in his hand and no token creatures on the field, he has to debate whether or not he wants to pay that exorbitant cost to just remove a creature and not even worry about the populate ability. So he's going to do a little bit of damage off the Visionary here. I did find kind of an early game play with the Rager. Unfortunately, didn't get this Gate Creeper Vine until late, so I couldn't get that in last turn. Also going to work pretty well against some of these 1/1 tokens that he can generate. So we're just going to go down, and we do, of course, at this point in time, we're well beyond that point where we have our 4th land for the Jailbreaker. End of my turn, he cracks the Centaur's Herald so he can get that token on and swing with it. Spitting Darkness at this point in time is useless because I do not have a card in my graveyard. So you may be considering, hey, maybe this is an opportune time. I can throw away my Rager at some point, and that will help build up my count. It's very important to keep things like that in mind. So I decided to take a little bit of damage here. I think with all my control out there, I can pretty much survive a little bit here against some of his attacks. And I'm okay taking some damage here. I know my Jailbreaker is going to come down right away, and I have an Elder as well. Now he throws down a Divine Favor here. It's going to make this Visionary a little bit tricky to deal with, but I'm not too worried about it. Actually, all it's going to do is basically work in my favor. At this point in time, it's going to make it tricky enough that I can't block it with my Rager anymore unless I want to sacrifice my Rager. But at the same time, what it ultimately does for me is give me a target for my Wickerbill Elder, and that's going to allow me to get that Elder into play as a 4/4 instead of just a 3/3. So, drawn to Putrid Leech, which is great. It's going to help us with creating some opportunities to kill creatures through combat. I think perhaps, the better play may have been the Jailbreaker right away. Getting at 15, you're at kind of this rough patch between whether or not you should be defensive or offensive. The Leech, I guess, gives us at least the opportunity to be a little bit of both. We can use it to block, and then our opponent knows that there's that chance that we can pay that 2 life and kill off his creature. Gate Creeper is going to come out. It's going to help thin down the deck. Going to grab a Guild Gate because I do have my 5th land that I need for this Elder. Most of the time, putting that Guild Gate down as our 5th land means that we would not be able to activate the Elder until the following turn. This is great. Here we get the Raven's Crime. We do have 6 lands available to us. 1 is still waiting to be played. This means that we've hit that mark and we can start using the Raven's Crime to discard my opponent's hand, and we're going to have options coming up that we can throw away lands to it. We're going to be able to sit pretty well at 6 mana here. So I did at this point in time, now that I have the Jailbreaker, I think I'm kind of at the advantage here for the creature balance. So I'm going to start being more aggressive with the Leech. He's going to sit back and take a little bit of damage, I believe, here. If the game loads up. He's at 23 life, so he has plenty of time to take this damage. I'm at 15, so you kind of get a feel for what both players are looking to do here, whether or not I'm willing to keep spending life even though I'm starting on the back end of 20. So you see here with the discard, this is kind of what I was talking about. Courses of Chord, it's one of the few populate spells that not only creates a token, but then allows you to populate. You get stuff, Eyes of the Sky is another one. There's a couple of them, however, that are like the removal spell, and it says, remove creature and populate. And if you don't have tokens available to you, then you're going to not be able to use that populate ability, obviously. So, of course, another Centaur comes down, and now he's going to start being able to swing, I guess, the creature momentum his own way. Oblivion Ring is going to come down and target that Jailbreaker, and I'm still okay with that because once again, I have the Elder, and that's going to give us the removal. And basically, his playing of enchantments is going to allow me to make that Elder much stronger. So now my opponent does realize he's in the advantage again. He's going to swing through with everything, and this is a good opportunity to use my Vine to just simply prevent some of that damage. The Leech is a great card in the early game for the aggression. In the mid to late game, when you're in a situation where you're at 10 or less life, all of a sudden it becomes much more tricky as to whether or not you want to be able to pay that 2 life and get that bonus. What I'm going to do here is throw down the Elder. I do have my 6th land in hand, but it may not be what you think. I'm going to use this ability right away to get my Jailbreaker back. Recreate our creature wall here. And then I'm going to make the play with the Swamp. The Guildgate does provide us with both colors, but what playing the Swamp does for me here is it allows me the opportunity to immediately use this Raven's Crime. If I had used the Guildgate as my 6th land, I would not be able to get that Raven's Crime play until next turn if I wanted to do so. So by putting that out right away, I give an opportunity to shrink my opponent's hand even more, and just in case he's holding on to something there, I think it's the most efficient use of our mana. So down comes kind of an interesting card here, Nat's Elite. It's going to beat me here in the clash, so it's going to get bigger. I do put that Swamp at the bottom of my library. All it is now is fodder for Raven's Crime, and with him having only 1 card in hand, then I'm okay with, sitting back and waiting until I get another land. If he had maybe 3 or 4, I would put it on top, and if I wanted to target those. The Elite does come down. He did win the clash as a 5/3, so it's a little bit troublesome, but I'm at that point in time where I can actually hardcast Spinning Darkness if I wanted to. Kind of keeping in mind here, I have 3 cards in graveyard, and only one of them is black, so I cannot actually activate its ability anyway. And also keeping in mind where Raven's Crime is. Top deck into Doomblade, so I'm going to actually use that right away to get rid of this Nat's Elite. This gives me a chance to, once again, I'm building up kind of the black count in my graveyard and save that Spinning Darkness. Maybe, I thought about it after I made the play. You can make an argument that the right play there is to cast the Spinning Darkness instead. Spinning Darkness is going to... Hopefully that didn't actually pop up there. So Spinning Darkness, what it does is deal 3 damage to kill a creature. So it's kind of a situation where, if you think about it, it can only be used on creatures with a toughness of 3 or less. So you may want to instead... I think the better play may have been to use the Spinning Darkness there to kill that off, because the Doomblade has the opportunity to target more options. So swinging with the Elder, he is going to decide to block with both Centaurs. I'm okay with making this trade. It's going to be a Centaur for the Elder. I do have, like I said, later on options to kill off creatures, and they are going to be kind of my priorities. It's kind of an interesting line on which tokens are my bigger priority. The Centaurs are the bigger bodies, but I do not actually have any flying defense, and it comes down to what you're most afraid of at that point in time. So it puts down Centaur Healer, going to put himself back up above 20 life, and he's going to continue to slowly work away with this bird. Luckily, we're at this point in time, I'm kind of getting a decent draw, finally hitting into my removal spells. I'm putting dead weight on the bird token. I do not have flying defense. I'm at this point in time where my life is so low that he can finish me off in 5 turns, even if I can kind of finally steady myself here. So that really had to go. And what that did give me as well was an opportunity to use the ability for Spinning Darkness and remove 3 cards. I do lose my Raven's Crime, but we are running 2 to kind of balance that out. And here, I think I made a bit of a misplay. I used Spinning Darkness targeting the Centaur Healer. I think the better play here would have been to remove the token so that it would eliminate any possibility of populating that. But it does put me back up 3 life, give me a little bit of breathing room, a little bit more chance to use the Putrid Leech. I am here, you see, using it in a defensive manner. Leaving it back like this says to my opponent, I am going to be able to block with this, and you're going to just have to deal with the fact whether or not I'm willing to gamble and risk my life total to get that guy up and kill off your creature. And actually, at this point in time, I absolutely would be willing to for the Centaur trade. So Unearthed here, if you look, the only thing it's going to be able to target here is my Gatecreeper Vine, so it makes more sense here to just cycle this away. Gets me into Grisly Salvage, which we will use to try and dig for a creature. Again, at this point in time, don't need lands. We hit our 6. So we're going to look for creatures. Our two options here are going to be a forest and a rager, which is great. The forest can go to the graveyard and we'll get the rager. And this actually works out just like I described it in the video, the deck video. Using Grizzly Salvage here, you see I do hit my second Raven's Crime, so that's going to go to the graveyard, which works out great. I don't, because that has that retraceability, it's really fantastic. You can use this Raven's Crime from your graveyard, and it's, thrown away, but you're still getting a chance to reuse it off of the Grizzly Salvage, so that worked out definitely in our favor. So I guess I could have been a bit more aggressive here, but I am definitely on the backside. You see I am at 8 life, my opponent's at 22, so I really just didn't want to chance anything going wrong. This now presents a whole new set of problems. This hexproof guy, I have to be more aggressive. The tokens are stuff I can deal with all my creature kill. The hexproof is not something I can deal with. I do not have any kind of edict spell. So in order to get rid of that hexproof, I need to start being incredibly aggressive. I need to start attacking through with the Jailbreaker, and I can leave the Putrid Leech back to block. If he decides to swing through with that guy, I can pump up the Leech and finish it off. So draw into a Doomblade. This is going to help my strategy here. Like I said, I need to be aggressive. I need to attack through. So by killing off the Centaur token, it means that he does not have an option to basically chump block with the lesser creature. So Rager's going down. My draw off it is a Swamp, and I do have a land available here, so I'm going to be able to use that Raven's Crime and get rid of the last card in his hand. Ends up being a Chorus of Might. So again, trying to force him into a situation where he feels the need, where he has to block with that hexproof creature. I'm going to keep swinging with my Jailbreaker. Another Centaur's Herald comes down, and that's going to be able to do some significant token creation. Swinging through here, draw into a Shinobi. At this point in time, there's little need to switch out the Shinobi if he had chosen not to block. It's something I can feel free to hardcast. He has no cards in hand. I have a Raven's Crime active in my graveyard, so it's doing a pretty good job of keeping his hand locked down. And if you switch it out, what you're basically going to do is kind of gimp your own damage. You're replacing a 4/4 attacker with a 3/2. So you're doing one less damage on that attack, and then you would be unable to play the Jailbreaker until the following turn, and it still would not be able to attack for another turn after that. So you would be significantly decreasing your damage. If anything, you want to be using it to switch out a Rager if you find yourself in a situation where maybe he decided to attack with this 3/3, or if there's just generically an opportunity to attack through with the Rager. Those are your two basic options here. So down comes, if this goes on a little faster, there we go, tapping out. He puts down another hexproof creature. This one a little bit bigger, a little bit harder to deal with, but it still falls in that range of 4 toughness, so we can still try and be aggressive with the Jailbreaker and try and do that 4 damage, and still leave the Leech back to pick up the scraps. Drawn to Dress here, completely useless because his hand is gone. I think, again, maybe perhaps a bad move on my part to leave that back, but I am at 7 life, so you get down this low, you kind of get a little more defensive. I decided I would just leave it back, and if he decided he wanted to attack through with either of those hexproof guys, then they were dead. So hard cast down my Shinobi. He does put down Knightly Valor, and this is a pretty decent enchantment. It's making this guy now a 5/6 Vigilance Hexproof, which is incredibly hard to deal with. I am going to have to throw away 2 creatures on the block if he decides to attack, which he does. I'm okay with throwing away 2 creatures on this. It's okay to me to just get rid of that hexproof guy. Like I said, I have no other way to deal with it, no edict effects. So I have to triple block here, and what it's going to do, it's going to kill off 2 of these of his choice, and it's going to leave me with hopefully 1 Rager. I believe the Shinobi is something that can easily go. Like I said, his hand is already decimated. I'm not worried about it. And then it gets really good. I top deck into Unearth. So he did kill off one of those Ragers, and that gives me a great target finally for the Unearth ability. And this will top deck us into an Deadweight, which we can use to kill off that token. So things working pretty good in my favor. Now that hexproof guy is off the field again, we're basically reset to that point where we were, before the Shinobi was cast, before he cast that other hexproof creature. So we're going to go back to attacking through with the Jailbreaker and trying to see what he can do against it, whether or not we can finally put him on his heels where he feels the need to block. So now with one card in his hand, I decided, okay, I can finally use the duress. Unfortunately, he kind of bluffed me out there, and it was a land. Good play on his part. Draw into our second jailbreaker, and that is going to go down. And this is definitely going to give us this situation where we can pull up a lot of defensive. We finally put up. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. It finally puts us in a position where my opponent feels that he can be defensive. He's feeling the pressure now. There are two 4/4 creatures on the table. He knows that he's going to need to start killing them off. Decides to block with both here, and once again, my priority for damage is that Centaur token as opposed to the 2/4 Elvish Visionary. So down comes Ethereal Armor, once again, making these hexproof guys incredibly hard to deal with. This now makes him into a 5/5 first strike hexproof. So if he decides to attack through with that, I mean, this is going to put me on the defensive once again. If he decides to attack through with that, I do have some options to block with multiple creatures and finish him off. Putting down the leeches, a little bit harder now to pay that 2 life now that we're down to 6, but we still will do it if we absolutely have to. Uses Prey Upon, which is a nice card. It's going to cause these two to fight, basically deal their power to each other as damage, and it's going to allow them to kill off my last Jailbreaker. Doomblade comes out. I'm going to use this opportunity to kill off the Visionary. It's not so much that the Visionary is hard for me to deal with, is the fact that it has this Divine Favor that I want to get rid of, because that will shrink the size of the hexproof creature off the Ethereal Armor. Still sitting back, like I said, can't be terribly aggressive with these leeches because of the fact that I have to pay that life to make them really big. Top deck into Elder, which is great. I'm going to immediately use it to kill off the Ethereal Armor, and now I'm definitely in a position I can start being aggressive once again. I do have a 4/4 creature I can start swinging with. It's really nice when they actually run enchantments as fodder, for these Elders to get them big. If you come against the deck that does not have the enchantments, all of a sudden they stay as 3/3s the entire game. So Rager comes down. He has pacified my Elder, which sucks. I am going to, however, start being aggressive here. The way I see it is this. We're at a point in time, we're still trying to get him to block to get rid of this hexproof creature. I can't deal with it any other way. I've got 2 Jailbreakers and 2 Elders in my deck, and those are the only creatures that are bigger, just straight out bigger than this guy, the Primal Hunt Beast. And at this point in time, 1 Elder and 2 Jailbreakers are in my graveyard, and the 4th 4/4 creature is pacified with nothing I can do about it. So my only option for getting rid of this Hunt Beast is to attack with the leeches. If he decides that he needs to block, then I can pump one up and kill it off. If he decides that there is, okay I think it would have been the better play for him here too. If he decides that he just wants to let the damage go through, I would not have pumped these up, and I would have just done 4 damage to him. Because, down to 5, paying 2 life to pump up one of these leeches, the only reason I'm going to do it is if I have a chance to kill off this hexproof beast, which I do. Puts him down at 12. He seems to be hitting a bit of a land pocket right at the opportune time for me. Echoing Decay in hand is great. Swinging through with all these 2/2s, and finally we've turned the tide. So you get a pretty good view here of the strength of a creature wall in this game. I was down to below 10 life for almost the entire game and was able to come back and kill off an opponent with 22. So there you go. That's a pretty good example, I hope, of the leech interactions and whatnot. Some of the good choices. So hope you enjoyed this one.